Actually, I haven't really paid much attention to it. But it goes by the Money GPS over there on YouTube. And what he essentially does in this video is that he goes over one of the reasons why the equities market is not a reflection of the real economy. And there's two reasons why I bring this up. Because for some reason, the general person who knows nothing about this thinks for some reason the S&P 500, the stock market index, which they don't even know what I said this in another broadcast there, or in another video. They have no idea what the S&P 500 is. They don't know what companies comprise the S&P 500. They have no idea how it's averaged out. Most of them probably don't even know how to calculate an average. That's not an exaggeration in America. But for some reason, they think the S&P is a reflection of the real economy. And just like how averages can be skewed, and I wish that were an easy example to explain to people, but again, that's tough when people don't know how to calculate that. Just a regular straight average. And again, this is a weighted index, so I'm sure that's even more complicated for them. But, you can thank our educational system for that. But, even though an average can be skewed, so can an index. This is in a different manner, but still, it's just a statistic, just like any other statistic can be fudged. And for some reason, I deal with the stupidest group of people on earth, even though their idiocy is still here right in front of me. And the other reason why I'm making this video is because of the idiot psychologists, the ignoramus psychologists, the pseudoscientists, as I call them. Now, those people likely would have tried to say, and I've said this in my email draft, that these people could have made me a trillionaire. But instead, they went the route of the idiocy that they do on the internet. Instead, they decided to help steal my intellectual property. They tried to tell me it was worth less than it was. And on top of that, insult me at the same time. And then tried to tell me that they were doing me a favor. No. This is one of the ways they literally could have made me a trillionaire. And we're going to go over the video. I'm just going to go over the video and go piece by piece how this part of the market indices are, or just the market in general, is manipulated. He titles it "The Real Reason Why Stocks Haven't Collapsed. Secret They Don't Want You to Know." I guess that's part of the reason why some of these complete morons, like I'm literally looking at right now, because they're the dumbest degenerates on earth, especially these fat schizophrenics that, yeah. But in any case, that's probably why they just brushed this off as some sort of conspiracy theory, because, some of the wordings are sensational. Just like in the end of this video, he reads off some quotes from Carol Quigley. Now, I haven't read his entire book, Tragedy and Hope, but I will at some point, and there is a I guess, well, it's more than truth. It's exactly what's happening. The only issue is that he phrases his wordings sensationally. But it's absolutely true. And this is a good example. Like David here, he actually goes through what I was saying about, and he pretty much reads Zero Hedge. And he was going through what I was saying about the Swiss National Bank. One of the reasons why the stock market is, manipulated. Well, not manipulated, inflated. It is manipulated, but that's through other means. That's through something like the what I call the price discovery insurers. But why is it inflated right now? It's because the central bank prints money to buy up equities. And, one of these being, for example, Apple. And they made Apple into a $1 trillion company. So for the degenerate psychologists who want to consider themselves scientists when they're completely ignorant, don't know what I'm talking about, and then try to say that I am completely maniacal or crazy or deluded when I say these assholes could have made me $1 trillion, could have made me a trillionaire, could have made me worth $1 trillion. It is absolutely possible in this world. I mean, it might be an inflated, monopoly money, but it's still $1 trillion fucking dollars. What I said was not untrue. What I said was not impossible. What I said was not deluded. Now, if I made my company, said about 3 years ago now, 4 years ago, if I started my little startup 4 years ago, listed it on an exchange, even in the U.S., these people, a central bank, it doesn't have to be the Swiss one, because there's other ones as well. It's the ECB, the Bank of Japan, and there is none officially. It's actually illegal for the Fed to do it, as he kind of says in this video. But there's also the Treasury, or the working group, the Presidential Working Group, I call them PDD. The colloquial term for it is Plunge Protection Team, because they don't allow market corrections. This is market manipulation. Now, what David describes here, what I was talking about earlier, is more inflationary. They inflate the market with printed money. But, that team that I call, price discovery destroyers, is because they've essentially destroyed price discovery. Now, when they were first made, they were here to prevent the market from dropping too far. Now they just prevent the market from dropping at all. There's no such thing as price discovery. It's no different than me walking into a grocery store, printing a bunch of monopoly money, and using it to pay for cookies. And then when the grocery store says, hey, I'm going to double the cost of that, and I still print more money to pay for the cookies, no matter how bad the cookies are, no matter how much debt the cookies might have on them. And then I print more money when they ask for a higher price. It's no different. But back to the issue with the dipshit psychologists. Now, again, I could have listed a company, and the central bank could have just kept buying up its shares, just like they did with Apple, just like they did with Microsoft, just like they did with Netflix. And again, those are in the disclosures, the SEC disclosures there. And they could have made my company have a market cap of $1 trillion. Or they could have had my holdings worth $1 trillion. It's all completely possible in the monopoly money printing world that you live in. But instead, these idiot degenerates, decided to do all the stupid things that they've done over the last 5 years and continue to do up until now. And for some reason, and I don't say this with, feeling bad at all. I'm glad I make money off of their demise now. I really am. And it's actually hilarious. David was saying here that, a lot of these idiots, they put comments on his videos like they're somehow conspiracy theories. No, this is actually how it works. Here are the disclosures from the SEC. And if you have any basic knowledge of, economics, even from a fucking high school level, it's really easy to recognize. I'm sure some of them still don't get it. But there was a funny comment in there where, the guy puts up the old Soviet saying, I've never heard it before, but it's funny to me. Oh, we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. Yeah, this is the same thing. In my situation especially, they could have paid me. They could have, made me worth a couple $1 trillion. All they had to do was print money. And why not? Stuff I do is quality. There's a reason why people, watch it. But instead, they decided to be a bunch of mentally ill assholes who, in their sick little minds, thought it was logical to do that and demand help. And I just watched another video of Zimbabwean farmers all of a sudden asking the people that they kicked out and stole all their stuff from to come back and help them. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to happen. But I'm sure the psychologists haven't figured that one out yet either. And, on that note as well, now, in the current economic collapse that you're in, and you are in an economic collapse, there's, just because, markets with no price discovery are going up, that has no correlation to the regular American's life. None whatsoever. And there's a reason why you can look up just about every few hours another round of layoffs happening somewhere. And in these sick people's minds, because whatever they've been conditioned to believe, they still think, oh, everything is awesome. No. And you even show them why it's not. I can take video of LA and show them what a third world shithole has become. But in their sick little minds, probably for the ones who haven't been there too, it's still that amazing Hollywood land. That's the land of milk and honey. And apparently the streets are paved with gold. And if you go to San Francisco, the streets are actually paved with shit. And it is a literal shithole. It's not an exaggeration. That's how much of a third world shithole it's become. But, in any case, the point being, you're in an economic collapse. And when that happens, just as I show a lot with, when I post layoffs, or when I post articles of layoffs, a lot of them are now all of these, jobs that are affected by taxpayer money. Just like the hospitals imploding. You know why? Because taxpayer money from Medicaid and Medicare does not pay them because the money doesn't exist. And that's what happens in an economic collapse because people don't have jobs to pay taxes. And you've been in one now since 2008. Now they tried to paper over it with a lot of money. That, of course, did not do anything. Aside from, maybe slow it down. But then cause hyperinflation later. But just like all of those city workers being laid off, again, when people don't have jobs to pay the taxes that pay your salaries, your job no longer exists. And then it's always hilarious to me that some union, starts to complain about it. Hey, the problem isn't with management. The problem is that the money does not exist. But to them, that's a conspiracy theory, I bet. Even though, it directly affects their pocketbooks. But in any case, I wanted to go over this video because it was a pretty good one. And I was just going to either speak over what he was saying or I guess pause the video and then comment on it. And it's odd that he even has to say that. That these people are so either brainwashed or indoctrinated that in their minds they can't conceive for a second that they don't have a free market. The communist Chinese have more of a free market than we do. But these people can't accept that. Especially with the stuff put right in front of them. All these disclosures put right in front of them. And some even dressed up on some website, making it easy for them to read. Because, he does say that it is difficult to read because it's not meant to be read. This isn't a prospectus. This isn't, something that's given out to people to get them to buy something. It's just some formality they have to do, and they're not going to do anything more than that. And that's not a conspiracy. That's just normal. And with this, I think he phrases that, again, in a way that might get people to think, oh, automatically that's conspiracy theory, just because of the way he phrases it. But here's the thing. It was initially a monetary experiment. At least that's what Bernanke called it. But it wasn't a monetary experiment on what they modeled it after, which was what the Japanese did in the Bank of Japan and what they did in about the 90s, I think, where they essentially just bought up their entire markets. And he goes over that part of that in the video there. The Bank of Japan owns pretty much, or all of the ETF market they have there. The exchange-traded funds. 75% of that supposed market they own. It's no longer a market. And if bonds drop, a little too much or even go up a little too high, they buy it up or sell it. There's no price discovery. They manipulate it, and they print the money to do it. They also participate in, the U.S. equity treasury, the U.S. treasuries, and actually almost, I was going to say control, but they do affect the yield curve, especially the longer dated end. Now, that's their policies. That's exactly what is happening. That buying and selling is there. That buying and selling is disclosed. None of this is a conspiracy. This is just what they do. And for people who have no idea about this, they're just going to go say, oh, look, the guy's talking about something I don't understand. Therefore, it is now a conspiracy theory. No. But to put it very simply, you do not have a free market. You have a manipulated market and an inflated market. But back to what he was saying, if these people are so difficult in accepting that, they probably have no business with it anyway. The only way it affects them is that eventually you don't have a job. That's all you need to know. Stop watching the video, because you'll probably just upset yourself some more. Just like these mentally ill psychologists who can't handle the fact that, yes, these assholes could have not these assholes. When I say assholes, I mean the usual retarded degenerate on the internet who is, complete piece of shit and worth nothing, and has no value in society, yet still acts like they do for some reason. What I was going to say was that these central banks could have printed enough money to buy up my shares and made me a trillionaire. They could have done that. And with that money, I could have used it I could have used it frivolously. I could buy private jets. Well, it's not frivolous if, it's actually useful to me. I get some sort of utility out of it. Yeah. But instead, these idiots decided to do what they did over the last 5 years. And now, it's not an exaggeration. A lot of them are losing their homes. They're losing the opportunity to buy a home. A lot of them have lost their jobs already and now work multiple low-paying jobs just to make ends meet. Their kids don't even find it, worth it to go to college anymore because they're not going to find a job afterwards anyway, at least not a worthwhile one, at least not one that utilizes a college degree. I'm sure that's the case here. And even now, even as I speak, I have another moron who, again, does this idiocy on the internet. And they're literally like idiot lemmings going off a cliff, making their stupid references. When instead they could have literally printed money and made me a trillionaire. And that's even said at the, at the end of this video too. And I was actually about to say it. Pause the video, start this one, and say it before, I actually said it. But these people, if they actually did care about you, oh, actually, that's not true. That's not true at all. But these people could have just printed money and handed it over to somebody. They could have handed it over to me. That's actually something they could have done. It's no different than enriching Bill Gates over there, or Warren Buffett. Coca-Cola was on the list of their disclosures there. I know he's a big shareholder. Or whoever might be the big shareholders, of Apple. They could have just handed that money over to me. But they didn't. And, I'm not saying I caused this, but I'm happy to watch them get what they deserve. But, again, the whole point being, these idiots, especially the psychologists who know nothing, are quick to come up with their little bullshit theories because they're so self-assured. They're, for some reason they think they're the smartest, greatest, know everything entities on Earth. And for some reason thinks that, what I say is not ever possible. Well, they also thought about that, they also thought that when they thought, their unemployment number was real and that their economy was doing amazingly well. No, it's not, and you're losing your jobs, just like I'm showing you. You're losing well-paying jobs that take down the lower-paying jobs with it. And that's because, those well-paid people, will hire somebody else to mow their lawn, do their laundry, wash their car, cook their food, restaurant, for example. And there's actually an example of a failed restaurant right behind me right now. So, when these people act like this is somehow some sort of crazy statement, their ignorance is not an excuse for them to go around saying that somehow there's something wrong with me. And especially their ignorance is no excuse to going around trying to label somebody as maniacal or making grandiose statements or grandiose expectations. No, this is a 100% possibility. If these pieces of shit did not prevent me from, creating my company 4 years ago, and then, a central bank decided to pump it full of their cash, their printed money. Oh, and they don't do that for no reason, too. There's a good reason why they do it. He touches it lightly, and he tries. The way he phrases it, again, makes it sound like a conspiracy theory. But, again, I'm going to go over that in a second. I'll go over the video. But these people really could have made me a trillionaire. And honestly, doing it in that manner, I use the word funneling through. If they inflate my share prices and make me a trillionaire, I go cash that out. It's honestly no different from them just handing me over wheelbarrows full of cash. But, they instead decided to do it for, like Warren Buffett, any of these other shareholders of these companies that are on these disclosures. And this is just one example. They're not the only one. There's many more examples like it. But we'll go over that in a second. And again, just because these idiots cannot conceive of it, be it the ignoramus psychologists, who are not scientists, by the way. They are absolutely not scientists. Everything that they create is arbitrary. All of what they come up with is based on some discussion a bunch of other pseudoscientists decided to agree upon. Nothing in the scientific method works there. These people, can't even exhibit logic. For example, they've tried to assert that somehow I am angry because, I have depression. No, I'm angry because of what you do on the internet. I'm angry because that you decided to impede upon my freedoms. But most importantly, and I think anybody else would be angry, They had beat on a lot of money that literally could have been trillions of dollars. And then tried to self-serve themselves by thinking they were going to write some sort of BS paper on it with their idiotic and, in my opinion, schizophrenic conclusions. But in any case, what I'm saying here is that, just because these people don't understand it, just because the usual person off the street who has nothing to do with this doesn't understand it, does not mean that it is not factually true. Just because you don't understand something does not mean it is not true. That does not mean it is a conspiracy theory. Just because Pablo doesn't know the word for green doesn't mean that the grass is not green. But for some reason, in the minds of these sick people, they think they know everything, and thus everything else that they can't understand is a conspiracy theory. And, this person even has to say, yeah, go along. If you're one of those people, go along and take your business elsewhere. Because nobody's asking you to watch this video. But that's another good example of their mentally ill mindset. They'll then get upset and outraged over somebody talking about exactly what's going on. Somebody telling them, hey, the grass is green. But they can't comprehend it. And then they get upset. They get outraged and think commenting with their useless opinion somehow anybody cares about. No, take your business elsewhere and move along. This isn't for you. Go away. Oh, and what he just said there, that's what makes it sound like a conspiracy theory. And it's not sinister. It's just either A, not well thought out, or B, not thought for the interest of the usual schmuck on the street. And we're going to go over the first example of the Swiss National Bank here. This isn't some evil plot by the Swiss National Bank. They're propping up the U.S. stock market. They essentially are. And in return, they just needed to cheapen their currency because it was too strong. It's not a terrible thing that they're doing here. They're actually making a lot of other people rich, including Warren Buffett. But their currency is too strong. They have to print dollars, or they have to print, Swiss francs. They flood it into the market by buying dollars, and then they use those dollars to buy U.S. equities. And in effect, what they're also doing is propping up the dollar to an extent by making their currency weaker. And he goes over this and says, they're trying to profit from it. No. But they're also not stupid. They're not going to lose money on it. But part of the reason why they do that is this. But that's why, idiots automatically think, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. No, just because this person who, you wouldn't know everything about it, neither do I. Phrases things in a certain way to the minds of idiots, to the minds of useful idiots, because that's exactly what these people are. Just like in the Soviet Union, they're useful idiots. They think, oh, conspiracy theory, I don't understand. That's not what I've been told. Conspiracy theory. Oh my God. Somebody said something else. The authorities told me a different story, and what you're telling me is different from that. It has to be a conspiracy theory. That's exactly what they act like. Yeah, we'll go over this. And what he just said there, is absolutely true. Nobody's going to publicize this. Even the PPT, the Plunge Protection Team, or what I call the Price Discovery Destroyers, because they're no longer protecting plunges. They just destroy price discovery now. They're called the President's Working Group on Financial Markets. even that is a name to disguise what they do. It's not a very transparent name. They're not saying, we're the group that stops markets from dropping. They called it a working group. Fuck is a working group? It's not something they publicize. It's not something that you'll find in an econ textbook. That's not something you'll find in a macroeconomic textbook. It's not something that, trying to think if that was even in the usual publications or like the commodities trading manual. I don't think it was. But again, this is not something they're going to publicize. These are not activities that they publicize. And for some reason, the financial news media, especially in the U.S., usually it is CNBC, Fox News, and Bloomberg. I think CNBC being the worst. And you can even go look that up. You can go look at the things that they were saying during as the 2008 crash was happening. And it's the same thing that they say now. Everything is awesome. Everything will get better. This is crazy. It's just a little correction. Blah, blah, blah. No, the only difference now is that the markets are fully, manipulated and inflated. Your economy is still crashing because they are not, share prices of companies are not your job that no longer exists. They're not, your taxpayer paid jobs that no longer exist because there's no tax money. That's the only difference now. But you can see them doing the same exact thing. Saying, oh, look, everything is awesome. Oh, and again, here we have another useful idiot. It's amazing. They make their stupid references and for some reason think, oh, look, my life is so much better. No, that's why I like seeing you get what you deserve. But back to what I was saying. You can watch these news media and see exactly what they're saying is false. And I pointed to a few examples on Bloomberg. And it's why I created this channel. What the fuck did this person just say? It is unbelievable they just said that. And, another one of the, I guess you can call him an economist. It's probably better classified as a market pundit, like what this channel is. But, Peter Schiff, for example, he went on CNBC saying, hey, the market's going to crash before the market crashed. And then you have all of their pundits there saying, this is ridiculous, this is crazy. It's the equivalent of saying this is a conspiracy theory and literally laughing at it. And then, even as the markets crash, they're still saying the same thing. Kind of like right now, you're in the middle of the collapse. It is crashing right now. Maybe not the markets, not the equities markets in the U.S., but the equities markets in the rest of the world, the currency markets in the rest of the world, and the debt markets in the rest of the world. Because there's actually more than one market. And I'm sure the typical schmuck off the street who doesn't know anything about this, and really, why would they? Why would they bother to know about it? Automatically thinks in their head, there's only one thing to look at. It's the S&P 500, and that says that everything is awesome. That's probably their mentality, and that's not the case. That's not how things work at all. So, as I was saying, and then finally, when it does crash, oh, wait, we don't know what happened. How did this happen? We're going to make a bunch of movies and videos describing it, trying to skew some bullshit. Or, push some bullshit story along. Oh, it's terrible, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they were telling you it was happening right before it happened. They told you it was happening long before it happened, actually. They told you it was happening as it was happening, but for some reason, you still got these, I don't know, they shouldn't be called journalists because they're the opposite of journalists. Just like these psychologists shouldn't be called psychologists either because, they likely would have said Peter Schiff just had some anxiety. No, this is what's going on in front of you. Here is all the facts laid out in front of you. What part of this does not make sense to you? But, in any case, yeah, so CNBC was probably the absolute worst in that. And I remember this because I was, living through it, listening to CNBC and watching it. Say, what the fuck are they saying? And the same thing probably for Fox News. I don't watch them, or Fox Business, I mean. And then Bloomberg recently has gotten pretty terrible. They're just absolute cheerleaders. And, they at least now put people on with different perspectives. But even CNBC, and the reason why I brought up Peter Schiff was that, hey, they don't even put him on anymore. They don't want him saying anything negative because people might realize what's actually going on. Just like in 2008, where they were literally laughing at him. And you can watch these videos too. The data's there. He's telling them, hey, there's going to be a housing crisis. No, there's no way they can fucking pay these. And then they actually say some of that stupid stuff. But housing prices never go down. Really? Who told you that? Who told you that? Yeah. And then, that's just the idiot stuff that they, put out there. And I don't think it's even idiocy. I think it's just outright, BS or lies. Because they're there, to be cheerleaders or something. Pretty much, propaganda. Propagandists. Like I said, this isn't a free market. And in fact, that network, NBC, that does not come without a little, political, propagandistic agenda. Be it stupid stuff in their movies with wars, or the financial markets. And that's the truth. That's a fact. You can see how they interact with the government with that. Especially with their little war propaganda films. You can see how they interact with the government. And for some reason, that's a conspiracy theory. Oh my God. Like that never happens anywhere else on Earth. Oh my God, he's so paranoid. I'm a psychologist. I'm a super all-knowing genius scientist. And he just exhibited paranoia, even though that happens everywhere. They're fucking idiots. But, they live in their delusional little world, and they don't want to accept what's going on. They don't want to accept what's going on around them. Yeah, and that's why this person here, David, has to say, hey, if you don't want to hear what's going on, you don't have to be watching this video, just like this one. Go take your business elsewhere, because it's not for you. So I hope everybody can hear the audio from this video. So now he's going over the SEC disclosure. This is just for the Swiss National Bank. This is the Central Bank of Switzerland. They print their money, they control their money supply, etc. Oh, and I'm sure people don't understand that as well. I think they have no concept of money in banking. I think they just think there's just a fixed amount of dollars there, and that, you go to the bank and you stick it in the ATM. And just like the example David over here gave in another video, that they take your money, they stick it in the vault, and then they put your name on it for you to get when you come back later. I think that's actually their idea of how money in banking works. No, it doesn't work that way at all. And I'm sure that's part of the reason why, these assholes will go on saying, oh, look, this is a conspiracy theory. And that's what David was saying, people were saying about his videos. And what he's doing here, he's actually going over what I was talking about in one of my videos that I didn't have the, I'm not in my office. I didn't go on to these, even do like a Google search on it, because I was just talking in my tablet, or my phone, my tablet, but same thing. But, he's just delving deeper into it. This is their actual disclosure. It's called a 13F disclosure that you have to file every quarter when you're holding large sums or large shares of these equities. See, and these are recent. This was filing, just a few weeks ago on August 9th for the second quarter here. Or is it the third quarter? That doesn't matter. Because it doesn't show the period, date, and beginning. So he goes to a website here that actually makes it easier to read. Now again, this is just a disclosure. This is a formality. This is a document that you have to file with the SEC. It's not a fucking prospectus that you make pretty and easy to understand for people, that you want to buy stuff from you. So that's why this person, this other website, makes it in an easier to read format. So what he just said there, $87 billion. It's actually more than that. It's $87.5 billion almost. That the Swiss National Bank owns in U.S. equities. Now again, why would the Swiss National Bank, a central bank whose only real duties are to print money and maintain their money supply, do that? Now, he touches on it a little bit later. But it's not because they're here to make a profit, but they're not here to make a loss either. Of course, they're not going to buy stuff up and then take a loss on it. They're there to control their money supply. That is what a central bank does. And for the Swiss, their currency is a safe haven. Not the U.S. dollar. The Swiss probably are the only, Swiss along with maybe the euro, are the only ones with sound money right now on Earth. Or soundest money on Earth. The dollar is toilet paper. For some reason, there's just some, liquidity to it that, I guess because there's more of it currently than others. And that's probably what you should consider, any appreciation in it as a liquidity premium. But the only real sound money on Earth right now is the Swiss franc or the euro. And that's up until the petro yuan, the gold and oil-backed petro yuan, and soon to be the gold and oil-backed petro ruble, and probably the soon to be, something backed euro. Probably at least gold. That's going to join them later on. But that is what the central bank is there to do. To maintain their money supply. Just like what the Fed, the United States Central Bank, is supposed to be doing. But they're in a far different situation. See, and you can take a look here. So these people printed money, printed their franc, to sell it, to make it weaker, because it's too strong, to buy up dollars. Now what the hell are they going to do with these dollars? Just sit on it as it fucking depreciates? No. They put it in equities that are appreciating. Why? Because all the other central banks are doing it. It's not just them that's piling into these. It's the Norwegians too, the Japanese, I think the Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds as well. But yeah, what they did there is print money. And then now, inflated these equities. So, they put billions of dollars in Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Johnson & Johnson, ExxonMobil, Google, both versions of Google, Visa, Intel, AT&T, Pfizer, United Health Group, Procter & Gamble, Verizon, Home Depot, Chevron, Cisco Systems, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Boeing, and see a few more there that's being covered up by my screen, I mean. So, whomever are the shareholders of these companies, they enriched. They increased the value of their shares. And this is what I was saying earlier, where, if it weren't for these assholes on the internet interfering with my business, I could have listed a company publicly. And, it doesn't have to be the Swiss Central Bank, but the Swiss Central Bank could have bought up a ton of its shares and inflated its share price and made me very wealthy. But instead, these idiots decided to do what they did, continue to do, and for some reason think that I owe them something other than giving them exactly what they gave. A whole lot of wealth loss. But again, there's the craziness for you. Again, those record highs are not based on fundamentals. They're based on one reason, this: money printing by central banks. The other reason is the cheap money from your own central bank. Now, your own central bank, the Federal Reserve, is not legally allowed to buy up equities. So they can't do what these people are doing. They can't do what the Swiss National Bank is doing, what the Norwegians are doing, the Middle Easterners, the Japanese, or even the European Central Bank. They can't do that. But what they did do is make money very cheap so that companies can borrow it and then buy up shares with it. Now, that also increases the share price. Again, inflating the share price. And, as we went over in another video, or an earlier video, the last video, that was posted at least. I'm going to be posting another video after that. In that video, we see that these companies have massive debt loads that they can never repay, but they use it to inflate their share price, one, by issuing dividends, and what essentially is paying off more than they actually make. That is what they are doing. That is how it is done. This is not imaginary. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's actually what happens when a company also takes a big-ass loan at essentially a negative interest rate. So they're paid to take that loan and then go and buy up their shares with it in a share buyback. And I'm sure that triggers the schizophrenics there. He said the word back. But in that share buyback, they also inflate their price. And again, they did it with cheap money from the Fed. It is not a direct mechanism where the Fed just went out and printed the money and bought the shares themselves, but it effectively does the same exact thing. And that's why those prices mean nothing. That's why, if you decided to print up a bunch of money and just go to the store and buy cookies with it instead of Microsoft stock, no matter what they charge for the cookies, it's the same thing. The price is meaningless. And it surely isn't a reflection of your economy, because those people who got laid off still lost their jobs. And even if the share price of their company goes up, that doesn't mean the company is profitable. Just like in that example of Coca-Cola, where they've actually made $4 billion less than they were about, 12 years ago? So even if a company's shares go up, even though they're losing money, they're still going to lay you off. And guess what? The stock price had nothing to do with your economic well-being. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's reality. Let's continue on with the video. Now remember, this is just the Swiss National Bank. There are many other banks like it. And that's essentially exactly what they're doing. They're bailing out these corporations with printed fiat currency. There's nothing backing these currencies. There's no gold. You can't trade it in for gold. You can't trade it in for oil. They're bailing out these companies who are not profitable by inflating their share prices. That doesn't mean that they're now profitable and that you're going to keep your job. That actually means the opposite. What happened with their share price means nothing in relative to your job, in relation to your job. Your job's still going to go. And that's why every few hours you get a nice little article saying somebody got laid off. And right there, again, he's looking at another website that makes it easier to read. But right there, you can see how much money this bank, just this one bank, printed up. Now, for the geniuses, these figures are in thousands, so that's the equivalent of billions. For the people who can't count or do math. A lot of people, apparently, because they can't tell the difference between a million and a billion. And this right here is the difference in this figure. Now, they just printed up an equivalent of $5 billion. That's just money out of thin air, buying up your stuff to inflate the price. That's all it's doing. Those companies did not become higher in value because they became more profitable. Their share prices became higher in value because they were inflated with money that was printed out of thin air. And here you have the exact figure. It is $5 billion that was printed out of thin air. And again, that was the equivalent in Swiss francs. They print Swiss francs, then they turn it into dollars, and then they use those dollars to buy those shares. Again, they're not doing anything bad here. It's not anything, terrible. They're buying up crap, bailing out basically these companies, these equities, in order to cheapen their currency. That's what they're there to do. And they're not doing anything bad to these people. The only bad thing is that, You now have idiots who don't understand that there's no price discovery and that that's not actually worth that much, but it certainly is not an indicator that their job is safe. It is not an indicator that their economy is doing well, because it is a manipulated number. It is an inflated number. All somebody had to do was print money to make it go up. It's that simple. It has nothing to do with your job. But for some reason, in the minds of idiots, ignoramuses is probably the word. It's a conspiracy theory. No, that's what they're in the business of doing. That's why that bank exists. And actually what they're doing there isn't, the worst thing on earth. They had to cheapen their currency for their own benefit, and they made Bill Gates richer because he owns, a lot of shares in Microsoft, and whomever else owns Microsoft. They made Jeff Bezos over at Amazon a 100 billionaire. They made Zuckerberg richer, and they made all the shareholders of these companies richer. But this is what I was saying. These stupid, useful idiots that I see gaslighting me on the street, likely none of them own a share of anything. And even if they did, they'd only own a tiny fraction and maybe got a few dollars richer and then ended up, losing their jobs and their future, etc. This has nothing to do with them. This doesn't affect them. This doesn't benefit them. An inflated share price has nothing to do with their economic well-being. Good or bad. It has nothing to do with their economic well-being. Now, it makes, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates richer, and it should have made me richer, but it has nothing to do with them and their economic well-being. And if they for some reason thought that everything was all of a sudden awesome for them and that all of their problems went away because Microsoft's share price went up, even if they actually were some low-level schmuck at Microsoft that doesn't own any significant share of the company, it doesn't affect them. It only affects the big owners like Bill Gates, who just made themselves a couple $1 billion more, albeit in fucking funny money and fucking monopoly money that's fucking inflated to begin with. But it doesn't affect the rest of them. And it certainly did not make their lives better or fix their problems or all of a sudden increase their economic well-being or make them richer. And it certainly doesn't get them to keep their jobs. Especially if the company still isn't actually profitable. Or is much less profitable, like literally on the list here, Coca-Cola, where I'm sure they're going to fucking, cut some costs to make sure they're more profitable than they were in this last year. And again, remember that the person making this video too, I think he's some Canadian from Toronto. Yeah. He doesn't give a shit if it was a fucking conspiracy theory. Why would he care? He's from Canada. He doesn't live in the U.S. This doesn't really affect him. I mean, the U.S. does affect Canada, but still. This doesn't affect him and what he does. Why the fuck would he lie to you? He might not phrase things in the best way, and he might not give you the complete story, neither can I. But still, why would this person lie to you? He's not even an American. And then, these assholes go on his channel, who know nothing, make stupid little comments, especially the fucking psychologists, I bet. You know, the stupidest fucking people on earth, because you know what? They live off of tax dollars. The ones who claim to do research need research grants for their leftist little institutions. Oh, and you know what? I will go into that too. Yeah, they're a bunch of fucking leftists. They feed off of the tax dollar, the taxpayer. And then they think they're going to put bullshit up that thinks that, probably think that, get them more tax dollars. But guess what? You're not, because there's no more tax dollars left. And guess what? Because you're ignorant of it doesn't make it untrue. Let's go back to the video. Now, what he says there is absolutely true. But, in my opinion, the only reason why this should be worrisome is because generally central banks, at least in the past, have only engaged in this when you're in actual crisis, when you're in an actual crisis. Now it just became standard to do. Like what I was saying before. Japan had a crisis. Their banks started printing up a ton of money. America had a crisis. They modeled it right after that and called it an experiment and printed up a ton of money. Now, it's just the usual order of business. Just print up a bunch of money and go buy up some sort of asset with it. And in this case, the asset class is equities. In this particular case. But it affects other asset classes as well. And for, again, the usual schmuck on the street who probably has no business watching this or does not know anything about this because it's not their business, there's this thing called an asset class. And one asset class is equities, what people call stocks, or shares of a company. Another asset class are bonds. And, that's the debt of a company. And there's also many other asset classes. But they probably don't even know what an asset class is. They could go say, oh, look, you're being crazy. It's a conspiracy theory. David, here's a conspiracy theory. No. This is what happens in this particular asset class. And there isn't just stocks on Earth for people to look at. Which, for some reason, again, in the minds of people, oh, look, the S&P went up. Everything is awesome. That is the only asset class on Earth. That is the only index for an asset class on Earth that you should ever look at to say that you are doing so amazingly well. Yeah, that's ignorance. And then when they don't understand it, it is now a conspiracy theory. And again, here, I have another group of idiots continuing on being useful idiots, thinking making stupid references to stuff will fix their problems. And what did he just say there? He says, oh, let's look at the stock markets. Everything is awesome. But yeah, let's take a look at the equities markets all over the world. Everywhere else is imploding. But for some reason, the U.S. economy is so amazingly good. Thus, that's why their equity market and the index of the equity market, the S&P 500, looks so well. No, that's delusional thinking. Your economy is imploding too. The only difference is that you have central banks from all over the world, amongst other things and other people, that are buying up equities here. Why is that? Well, probably for several reasons, like the Swiss National Bank needing to cheapen their currency. Other banks probably doing the same thing. Other people just looking for liquidity. It's a liquidity premium. It is not anything based on the health of your economy or even how profitable the actual company is. Because just like in the example with Coca-Cola, they were losing profits. Their profits are way down. Or the other one, issuing dividends more than they actually take in. But it also doesn't change the fact that everything else is imploding on Earth and that you're nothing special. Your economy is imploding too. You just have share prices that are going up for this specific reason. Oh, and that's interesting, too, to note that the Chinese market is in a bear market. That's because the Chinese are smart enough to start controlling their debt before it becomes a huge implosion. Something they're not bright enough to do here. Now, again, the Chinese do not have a free market. They are a centrally planned economy. They are a socialist country. But the odd thing is, the U.S. has a more socialist, non-free market, more market that's manipulated and controlled. But at least the Chinese are smart enough to start controlling their debt. Their debt became a problem, they recognized it, and they're fixing it. And they'll let their equity markets go down. And they even have a Chinese, version of the plunge protection team. And even they let it correct. Here, you just have price discovery destroyers who make price discovery absolutely impossible. And what is price discovery? Letting things go to its actual value. Why does a company have value? The simplest way to put it, because it's profitable. A company who has some inflated share price and is not profitable still means it's going to lay you off. 7 shares. And what he said there is not an exaggeration. Even if you're some schmuck with 7 shares of Amazon and you made a few dollars off of some central bank printing money to inflate your 7 shares, literally a few dollars, that did not do anything for the greater fact that your fucking economy is imploding and you're probably going to lose your fucking job. Or for some people, their retirements are absolutely gone. And don't forget what happens when it does finish imploding. All those dollars that you do have become fucking worthless. Especially because nobody on Earth wants to take it anymore. Because of the other stupid shit that they do. And what he says there is not untrue either. Even though it may sound a little sensational, guess what? Guess what happens when these banks start liquidating these fucking stocks? The market plummets. Or, in other words, guess what happens when your own central bank starts or stops printing money, which is what they're doing with their quantitative tightening, because they know things are overinflated. Especially certain asset classes like equities and real estate. What happens when they stop printing the money, or in the case of your own central bank, what happens when they start quantitative tightening? Those share prices implode. Because guess what? They don't have any more cheap money to keep funding the buybacks, the mechanism by which they inflate their own stock prices. A company will borrow money at cheap money to buy back their own stock to make the stock price go up. That's how it works. That's not imaginary. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's something that you could take at any fucking dipshit MBA, and he probably would have read about it in his fucking shitty ass 2 years in business school. And again, if for some reason the ignoramuses out there, especially the psychologists, think that is some sort of exaggeration or delusion or whatever the fuck, paranoia even, we just went over an article the other night stating that corporate lending is down because interest rates are going up. Again, that is exactly related to this. It is no longer cheap for them to borrow that money. It is no longer worth it for them to borrow that money and buy up some stock or buy up another company in that M&A activity article. Or buy up their own shares and take, for example, even taking it private. It is not cheap enough for them to do that. And on a tangent, Elon Musk, who is, trying to take his own company private, he better fucking do it soon, because it's going to be fucking difficult to finance that shit, as interest rates go up. So yeah, those share prices have nowhere to go but down. In that context. Not Elon stuff, but again, the point being, once they start tightening, once other banks stop printing money to do this, just like this person said, they hold their finger on the scale. to tip things in the balance of these people. And just like in that movie, once they take that finger off that scale, things get really fucking fair, really fucking fast. And in this case, fair value. Actual value. Because it's not worth that much. And what he said just there is the kind of stuff that makes it sound like a conspiracy theory, but what he said isn't untrue, and he just didn't explain it all. First of all, again, these people aren't in the business of buying up shares and making money off of them. But they also sure as hell are not going to take a loss on them. So of course they're going to make some money off of it. But again, in this specific example, they're in the business of controlling their fucking monetary supply. That's what they do, and this is how they're doing it. This is for the Swiss National Bank, I mean. But what he said prior to that was also very important, because what precipitated, or what was before, the 2008 crash? Liquidity dried up. There wasn't as much money out there. And what happens when they tighten up that money? The exact same thing. It is no different. And that's exactly what why what he's saying here is important. No, he's not explaining that part. But that is a key factor to it. And what precipitated, or what preceded the same thing that happened in all the other crashes before it. The same exact thing. Liquidity dried up. There wasn't as much money going around. And when these people start tightening, when these people stop printing money, because they have their finger on that button, they have that finger on that trigger, guess what? The same exact thing will happen. Again, that's where he's incorrect. They're not there to buy stuff on the cheap, but they're not there to lose money either. They're there to control their money supply. Now, what he just said there, I think, is it's foreign reserves. Again, they're in the business of controlling their money supply. They control how much Swiss francs there are in the world. And when they have to do that, they have to buy up dollars. That's their foreign reserves. Then they use those dollars and put more than half of them in U.S. equities. And again, they're not investing. They're putting it there for a reason. One being, they're not going to take a loss on it. Again, these are all examples of other central banks around the world using their money, their U.S. dollars that they for some reason have, and buying stocks with it. Again, there are different things they could have bought. They could have bought bonds. They could have bought bonds from Treasury. They could have bought bonds from companies. But instead, they bought stocks with it. And again, it inflates the share prices of the stocks and doesn't make the underlying company of the stock any more profitable. Thus, you are still not guaranteed to keep your job. Just like how you could see Microsoft, who is a beneficiary of this, was one of those companies that laid people off, especially on their LinkedIn division. Because share prices do not make your company more profitable. And what he just said there, you wouldn't call it necessarily a subsidiary, but, for example, the way that the Fed uses, the President's Working Group on Financial Markets to essentially buy up anything in any asset class with printed money. I'm sorry, is that the Treasury? I gotta look that up. But the point being, they're still engaging in the same sort of activity. Legally, they're not supposed to do it, but they just have another group that they're very much affiliated with. Even if it is the Treasury, to do the same exact thing. Now, what did he just say there? 29.1 trillion with a T. Public sector, meaning government institutions in 162 countries have pumped in that much money into your system. All funny money. All fiat currency to inflate. That's what happens. It's no different than the Weimar Republic in Germany for those that do have a rudimentary, knowledge of economics. It is no different from Weimar Germany printing up money and getting hyperinflation. In this case, they don't have to take wheelbarrows full of cash to go buy, food down the street. But they do need wheelbarrows of cash to buy shares in anything, in equities or real estate. And that's not exaggeration. On Zero Hedge, they just published a recent article on their little blog there showing somebody paying $4 million for a rundown shack somewhere in Vancouver. You need wheelbarrows of cash to go buy real estate. You need wheelbarrows full of cash to go buy shares of Microsoft and Amazon. It is no different than inflation printed from money in the Weimar Republic than $29 trillion of fiat money being printed up by 162 different countries. You have an inflated equities market, and it has nothing to do with your actual economy, even though just for now, right now, you don't need wheelbarrows full of cash to go buy a can of soup over at the supermarket, which, by the way, is also increasing in price now. Now, again, the way that even this person, Carol Quigley, tried to present this sounds sensational. And that's why you get the people yelling, conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory. But here's the thing. What he said, no matter how sensational, is not factually untrue. Now, first of all, Carol Quigley here was a professor at Georgetown, and I'm not an expert on him. I don't know a lot about him, but he probably is somebody that people should know, understand, or at least his works, especially this Tragedy and Hope book. That's probably something that should be a New York Times bestseller, but it isn't. It's actually very difficult to get a hold of. There's a downloadable copy on the internet, but it's redacted. It has parts of it missing. Heavily edited, I guess, but redacted is probably the better term. There's parts of it missing because for some reason somebody thought that should not be publicized, that should not be published, So if you could actually get a copy, a full version of their book and read it, and I haven't been able to. I have a downloaded copy that's difficult to, it's not difficult to read. It's just not in a nice, it's not a book. It's not in a nice format, etc. But, it's something that everybody should probably read to get an understanding of what things are going on, because this person actually has connections to Bill Clinton. I don't know if he was a student or whatever, but, this isn't a person that doesn't know what they're talking about. This was a person in a network of people, a little circle of people. It's not a conspiracy theory, because, these people actually do know each other or know of each other or know of their work. And I think Bill Clinton cited Carol Quigley's work quite a bit. So he knows exactly what's going on. And, that's something you have to look up. I won't do it right now. But what he says here, when he describes, the central bank, financial control in private hands, that's not an exaggeration. He makes it sound sensational, but that's actually what it is. The Federal Reserve is not a public institution. This is not run by the government. It has affiliations with the government, but it is not run by the government. It is not transparent to the government. It is a private corporation, who with their actual members, or I guess their shareholders, would be the banks, the bigger banks like the J.P. Morgans, Goldman Sachs, etc. But it is a private institution. They even called it the Federal Reserve, again, as a misnomer, to make it sound like it was something federal. It is not federal. It is not controlled by the federal government. It is not funded by the federal government. It is not overseen by the federal government. The federal government, if you ever pay attention to Ron Paul demanding an audit, it is not even able to be audited by the federal government. It is a private institution. What this person says here is not an exaggeration. As sensational as it sounds, it is not untrue. And that's where you get the conspiracy theory ignoramuses, and probably especially the stupid dipshit psychiatrists or psychologists. Oh, it's paranoia! It's paranoia! It was raised in a certain way, it must be paranoia! It's not what you say, it's how you say it! It's paranoia! No, really, that's part of their bullshit. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. No, what he said is factually true. It is a private corporation. It is not a public institution. And if you take a look on your dollar, go into your cash in your wallet and say, it is a Federal Reserve note. That is not issued by the government. That is issued by a private institution that does have affiliations with the government, but it is a private institution. And that's why it's called a note. Just like a, T-bill, T-bond note, treasury note, or like any other note you might get from a bank, like a car note, what they used to call, car loans. It is not anything but paper issued by a private institution. And the last part there, in a feudalist fashion, it sounds sensational, but it's not exactly wrong. These people wield a lot of power when they issue your currency. When they issue your money and control the supply, guess what? You're pretty much serfs. But by the central banks of the world acting in concert by secret agreements. That's not untrue either. And you can even show, just with a very simple case, the Shanghai Accord, where certain banks in the U.S., or I'm sorry, not in the U.S., the Chinese, and what's the other one, decided to, peg their currency a certain way in their own secret little agreement. They didn't publish it. They didn't let other people know about it. People in Congress do not vote on this. What he said isn't untrue. And even now, you can probably see what they're doing, where all these central banks in the world are buying up equity shares, stocks in these companies. You could almost see that as just an understanding. It's not even a secret agreement, but they are acting in concert. They're all buying up the same thing, all propping up the one same market for whatever reason it is that serves them. The Swiss National Bank being, it's not a bad thing. They want to cheapen their currency, fine. Guess what? They prop up your own stock market that probably would have crashed by now. They didn't do a terrible thing. But again, it has no relation to your actual life, to the actual regular person's life. That has nothing to do with you. It still doesn't save your job. Now, you're not Bill Gates. You're not going to make another $1 billion. Nothing to do with you. But with this person that they'll try to say conspiracy theory, and I think he wrote the book because he was in that circle of people who knows what's going on in that little network, or what these people, and by definition of the word conspiracy is, the act to conspire by a group of people. So he just knows what's going on and he just writes about it. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's no different than me, writing about what my group of friends does. It's nothing different. Well, it's conspiracy theory to other people. And what he just said there was almost exactly what I was saying earlier. Yeah. So, these assholes decided to do what they did, in my own personal life. When instead, hey, they didn't want to just hand me over bags of cash, fine. Guess what? This is another way you could have done it. You could have had me start my company. You could have inflated the share price. You could have made me a trillionaire. That's not an exaggeration. They made Jeff Bezos a $100 billionaire. With enough printed money, you could make me a trillionaire if I owned all the shares of my company, just like how they turned Apple into a $1 trillion company. If one person, what's his name, Steve Jobs was still alive and he still owned 100% of Apple, they would have made him a trillionaire. That's not an exaggeration. Or, even better, they just start, why even go bother with that mess? Why even bother with the little mechanism there? Why even bother funneling through it? Just hand over the bag of cash. It's the same fucking thing. There's no difference. Except now you just, put it through some formality. There's no difference than printing the money. And what did he just say there? Exactly what I've been saying this entire time. No matter how much money those central banks print, no matter how much money they come up with, he doesn't see a dime himself. Just like the vast majority of anybody else. Unless you're Warren Buffett, unless you're Bill Gates, unless you're Jeff Bezos there, unless you're a major shareholder of some of these companies that are being bought up, you don't see a goddamn dime. You don't. Because even if Jeff Bezos decided to cash out some of his shares, and buy a new mansion over in Washington D.C. again, for example, how much of that do you see? Not much, if at all, unless you were the fucking real estate agent that did the deal on the fucking house. Actually nothing. And if whomever, sold that house decided to actually spend that money instead of, stick it in the bank or buy some more equities of Jeff Bezos' company. So yeah, you don't see a fucking dime of it. But for some reason you think it increases your standard of living or your economic well-being. It's not the case. I guess what he said there is kind of untrue because it goes to the Norwegians. The money they make goes to their sovereign wealth fund, and it does go to their people eventually. But again, for the average American, no, that didn't do shit for you. That didn't get you any goddamn money, and it sure as hell doesn't get you to keep your goddamn job. And exactly what he said there is exactly the way you should put it. Anybody who tells you that, this somehow is benefiting you, either from, a CNBC, Fox News, MSNBC, CNBC, Fox Business, Bloomberg, telling you that somehow you benefited from this economically, you are fucking deluding yourself. You are fucking deluded because it has nothing to do with you. And it has nothing to do with your economic well-being. And that's why every fucking hour, every few hours, I can go on the internet and show you another couple hundred well-paid people now out of a fucking job because they got laid off. So again, that is an absolute correct statement from this person. And it's the absolute truth. You are absolutely delusional if you think any of the crap that these people are spewing in the mainstream media is fixing your life or making it better. Or even better, the stuff on the internet involving me personally is probably the same exact analog. Somehow, they think that made their life better. It didn't. And actually, I'm going to go back a few seconds here on the video, because there's a nice little part here that he actually doesn't talk about. And it's the Chinese, and it's saying it may be the Chinese not acting in concert with those who break up this cartel. The PBOC is no more transparent than the Fed, but it is not an independent central bank. It absolutely is not. It's a government agency controlled by the Chinese government, acting on the interests of the Chinese government. And the Chinese have figured out the game of the independent central bankers, and to be using it to their own advantage. If the Fed can do quantitative easing, so can the Chinese. And they can buy up your assets with the proceeds, owning your corporations, or I guess even better, most of your land, and you having to pay rent to them. Peter Schiff was actually alluding to this in one of his podcasts that I was listening to yesterday. And yeah, he's just laughing at these people because it looks like the United States is a colony of the Chinese. The Chinese make, finished, high quality, manufactured goods, and the only thing that the U.S. sends them are raw materials. Just like how, the colonies did back in the 16, 17, 1800s. And then, they take the money that they make off of you, and then they buy up all your land. They buy up all your land, and then, you pay rent to them. And that's after they loaned you money to buy up all their shit. Yeah. And he was just kind of laughing at this, saying, this is a terrible situation. Why does anybody think this is good? You look like you're a colony, like a third world country of the Chinese. And what he said isn't untrue. And even this person says it in this little article here. Let's go back there. Oh, and that's absolutely correct. Owning your corporations rather than your treasuries, which are worthless, by the way, because they're junk debt. And again, people only now pay a liquidity premium because there's a perception of quality and a perception of liquidity. But once that perception goes, nobody's going to want that shit, and there will be no markets in it because it's junk. But yeah, owning your corporations rather than your treasuries does help the U.S. break up U.S. dollar hegemony. And what does that mean for, again, the usual schmuck off the street? It means, guess what? The only reason why you could print money was because you were the reserve currency. Because everybody else took the dollar. But now, when people don't, guess what? You get hyperinflation, and you're going to take wheelbarrows full of cash down to the store to buy food, just like the Venezuelans. And I'm sure the dipshit psychologists would try to liken that to something like anxiety. It's happened everywhere else under the same circumstances. What makes you think you're different? So I would ask the ignoramus psychologists if they're also deluded and delusional. Because guess what? You're no different. The only difference that you have is that you are the largest creditor nation. You have racked up the highest amount of debt, even adjusted for inflation, in the history of mankind. Worse than the Weimar Republic. Yet for some reason, you think that you're going to end up differently than the Weimar Republic did. No. The only difference will be your inflation will likely be worse. Oh, and look, another dumb shit schizophrenic here, making a reference, because again, it's another fucking useful idiot. I'm gonna make a reference, and all of a sudden, everything will be okay. No, you just made your life worse for yourself. Again, he makes it sound like a conspiracy theory. They're not in the business of making money off of equities, but they sure as hell are not in the business of losing money in it either. I know, and it's ridiculous too. You put it right in front of them in a nice, easy to read format too. And the asshole still cried, oh, and look, here's another idiot. Well, I like to see them lose their job. And this moron here. Yeah, that real estate's gonna crash. So. Anyway, let's go over the comments too. He'd been mentioning the comments. I've only seen a few. Again, people with their own little conspiracy theories. This one's actually a pretty funny one. That printed money isn't made out of nothing. It's made out of future suffering. No, the suffering's right now, actually. But, yes, he is correct. This one's a good one, too. It's correct to an extent. Yeah. In 2008, in that collapse, yeah, they had to put in market manipulation to save it. There was no recovery. And now, because of their manipulation, they have to keep printing. Otherwise, things come back down to reality. Ponzi scheme is also a nice way to put it. You know, I print money, I buy up stuff, I sell it, and then somebody sells it to somebody else who thought it was worth more. The next greater fool. Trying to see these. A lot of idiots here too. Where the rest of these comments are. Oh no, somebody else's. This one's a funny one. It's a trillion. It's 20 trillion more likes than you can match the national debt. It's actually 250 trillion. When you take a look at the liabilities they've accrued. This is the funny one that I saw. Old Soviet saying, we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. House of Cards is a good way to put it. Yeah, that'll be my thing. This is a good one. This is a good comment. He's commenting about the homelessness problem in LA. And again, there's a reason for this. There's only, well, not only, but there were two big asset classes that got the brunt of the inflation. One is the equities, the stock market, and the other one is the real estate market. Because again, when you use cheap money to buy up your own stocks and inflate those equities, it makes the share price go up. When you use cheap money to go buy up real estate, it makes the real estate price go up. But here's the problem. Not everybody can get access to that cheap money and buy up or borrow as much as, you know, some other people can. And then they, you know, the funny part is then they turned it into that socialist bullshit, which, you know, got you into your mess to begin with. Oh, and this one's a good one. Most people don't care as long as they have money to spend. Well, guess what? It's just like these assholes thought, in my situation, oh, everything's funny and awesome and entertaining. It's not so entertaining when your job is gone. Look at this idiot. That was depressing. Why would you be depressed about reality? You should be happy you know the fucking reality instead of being a fool. Well, exactly what, it's just like he says. It's exactly what they are. They were fools. They were fooled into thinking that bullshit. This is a good one. It's not a backdoor to socialism. It is socialism. You have a government manipulating your markets, controlling who gets the cheap money so that they can survive versus the others who don't. That's exactly what socialism is. The people who have the friends in the right places are the ones who prosper. Everybody else ends up poor. And that's exactly what you got. Like that, with that previous comment saying, oh, everybody in LA is dying on the street. Yeah, there's a reason for that. Your socialism. Oh, and this one, I guess, is inflation. It's a good way to put it. Kool-Aid peddling stuff out there. Pretty much the mainstream media and a lot of the other dipshits. And look, even now, I still have a bunch of useful idiots in front of me in their little schizophrenic, little idiot world, delusional, deluded world, still thinking their idiotic stuff is going to get better for them because they participate in it. And again, we were just talking about socialism. This is the definition of the term useful idiot. It's even when people act against their own interests, but they've been so manipulated, so bullshitted, they actually think they're benefiting themselves. Now this one's funny. I thought it was because the economy is doing so great, everyone is making crazy money and everyone is spending like there's no tomorrow. Yeah, if everybody were making crazy money, you wouldn't have credit card debt to the highest levels ever. They're living off of credit. That's probably the stupidest comment I've ever seen. Maybe U.S. equities have become the new store of value of central bank reserves as they are priced in U.S. dollars. Risk on inflation hedge. No. It is the inflation. And when the underlying asset has no actual value, like all of these companies who are not profitable and thus keep laying people off, that is not a store of value. Gold has a store of value. An unprofitable company does not. Oh, this one's a funny one. This is probably the... Oh, it's a conspiracy theory. Oh my god, I don't understand it, but so it has to be conspiracy theory. I guess I don't see the comments he was complaining about there. But yeah, again, the idiots that somehow thought, their idiocy on the internet was going to benefit them because they, for some reason, thought they were in some amazing economic position because of the S&P. You're wrong. Your economy is imploding. And, I bring that up because even in one of my last jobs, I was saying to somebody else, oh look, the economy's terrible, and then immediately they retort, but the stock market is going up. The stock market has nothing to do with your life, even if you do own 7 shares of Amazon. Because unless you're Jeff Bezos,